Hey folks, we are here talking about a black woolly bugger with a red bead head and furnace hackle. We're going to actually tie this in a little bit, but right now, this first part of the video, I wanted to simply walk you through the ingredients and what we need to make this. When I get done talking about the ingredients, I'm also going to talk about why I customized it this way. All right, so basically the tail is made up of strung black marabou over the top of some crystal flash root beer pearl. And so here's the marabou, strung marabou black, 1/4 ounce strung, and it comes out and it ends up looking like basically a feather. And you tear off, you know, enough to make a fairly thick tail. And you put that marabou on top of crystal flash, and I chose root beer pearl color. And so that goes underneath there. And then when we get to the body, we start back here and we tie on the body hackle. And when you take hackle and you don't put it way up here, but you put it over the body, that's called palmering, palmer. This happens to be a, so we tie on the body hackle and the body material. All right, so let's talk about that. The body hackle comes from a chicken neck, and it is a furnace color, and it comes in a package where you get the whole neck. And I'm going to tell you my own personal preference here. The reason I like an entire neck is because I can find small hackle down here that fits a size 10 or 12 or 14, and I can find bigger hackle back here that'll fit a size 8 or larger hook. When you buy just a bag of loose hackle, it ends up usually being just the large hackle, and it ends up not being very suitable for these smaller hook sizes. I'm going to get to hook size, by the way. All right, so we tie on the body hackle, we tie on chenille. Now, I am a fan of sparkle chenille. They make them in both flat and sparkle. This is black sparkle, and so you can see kind of the metallicness on the inside of it. You can also see it showing up here inside the chenille. So then we tie that on, we finish both of those off up here. We've already put our red bead on, we put a drop of glue, and now we have this beautiful black woolly bugger with red bead head and a furnace body hackle. Now, why is this a good fly? Well, you're listening to what I would call Mr. Renegade. I mean, when I started tying flies around 14 years of age, I tied nothing but renegades, which is going to be in another video. And they're very successful in the Pacific Northwest and Alaska and Idaho and Oregon and probably other places. I mean, I've fished a renegade in Chicago, Illinois, and did great. But a year or so ago, a very dear friend of mine from childhood, I mean, we probably go back to kindergarten, came back into my life, and we are older now, and we can fish more. And what you find out, he introduced me to a green woolly bugger with a red bead head, and he would argue that it outperformed the renegade. I would argue he was at the right depth and I wasn't, but hey, we can go round and round on that. The most important point of that is I started experimenting with tying olive woolly buggers with red bead heads, and then I began to look at the history of the woolly bugger and how versatile a fly it is, and I realized that a lot of these high mountain lakes, or even the lowland lakes, have black leeches in them. And black leeches typically, I think, have like a trout egg that they're sucking on. So there's your red bead head. Or they just have like a dot of blood because they're a leech and they've been eaten on an animal or something. I don't know what they eat. And they have a little dot of blood. And so my contribution to the woolly bugger lore is that I decided to add the furnace hackle. I'm doing this so that you can kind of see that furnaceness. And it's got some black in it, but it's also got that furnace. And so my theory is that this body hackle being furnace and not straight black gives kind of a smeared blood thing to it. I could be wrong, but that's the story I'm going with. A couple more tips on this fly, on any fly. Sharpen those hooks. Sharpen those hooks. They come from the factory actually fairly dull, in my opinion. And so I always sharpen them. Finally, let's talk about hook. I have been fishing since I was young, very young. And like I said, I started tying flies at 14. I have been looking for the ideal hook size that I can use for multiple types of flies, multiple colors, and I have found a size 10 that is 3 times as high, so it's 3 times as high this way, and it's 2 times as long. Ends up, I mean, it almost looks like an 8, doesn't it? But it still has aspects of 10 that I like. This ends up being the perfect size for every fish I like to catch, because I like to go after, hatchery fish that are 10 to 12 inches, maybe a little high, maybe 14 to 16. And I've used this very fly to catch 4 to 5 pound German brown, and I've even caught 5 pound rainbows in this one lake that we fish at. And so this, I think, is even more effective than the olive color with red bead head, and maybe even more effective than the Renegade. Let's put it this way. The king of the Renegades here talking to you has switched to this one is my first fly I try, and I try Renegades after that. And then I'll try olive woolly buggers and brown woolly buggers, and they even purple woolly buggers. And those not only work on trout, but purple woolly buggers work great for bass. We have some lakes around here that have both bass and trout, and we've been able to catch nice 2 to 3 pound smallmouth bass on on a purple woolly bugger. All right, finally, I just use this this head cement, and it comes out nicely. It has this, you know what? I didn't head cement this one. So you kind of shake it to get a little drop on there, and then you put that drop right behind the red bead. And it kind of, and what it does is it solidifies, it makes it so that knot can't come undone, because there's 2 knots sitting right there where I tied it off. And it also kind of keeps the red bead from moving around. So now you've got this perfect fly here. Oh, the ways we fish it. Well, that's its own video, I suppose. But lately, we use anywhere from 1/4 ounce to 3/8 ounce lead slip sinkers and a leader, and we'll troll these behind a little rowboat. Or if we're casting, we will use a typical casting bubble that you can fill full of water. So you fill this whole thing full of water, and then you put the pin in, and you run your line from your fishing pole through here, and it ends at a swivel, and then a huge long piece of leader that hits your fly. And then you fill this bobber all the way up, and it will sink, and it will go near the bottom, and you can slowly inch this thing along the bottom and just tear it up. So, all right, that was me running you through a walkthrough of all the ingredients of this thing that I use, and now I'm going to switch to the next video where I'm actually going to tie one of these. All right, folks. This is the black woolly bugger with the red bead head and the furnace body hackle. We're going to actually, this is what we hope to end up with, and we're going to actually tie this right now. So we'll get this off the vise. I've got my hook and my bead. The bead has a small end and then a large hole. We want to go the small hole onto the tip of the hook so that we can run it all the way through, and then the hook ends up at the top. And this hook will move around a little bit as you're tying this, so don't worry about it. It'll finally stop moving once you get everything once you get everything tied off at the front. All right, so the first thing we're going to want to do is take our waxed thread with our bobbin, and we're going to tie on right here and just kind of create a thread base all the way to the back. And I usually stop right about where the barb is. So there's the barb of the hook right there, and that's about where I stop. So now we're going to put the tail. And the tail is composed of some strung marabou on top of some crystal flash. And so we'll get ourselves our strung marabou first. I usually tear off almost the whole side. Okay. And then you try to gather it together so that it's halfway tail-like. And sometimes you can lick your fingers if you want, get it all to stay. And then what they suggest is that you don't cut that end to make it uniform, you kind of rip it with your fingernails. And so I've taken to kind of ripping it off, and then it makes kind of a less exact tail. All right, so I'm going to set that down. I've got that ready. And then I usually pick about 3 strands of the, so there's 3 strands of the crystal flash. And I try to just keep cutting them in half until I have a whole bunch of it together. And then it's just easier to work with. So here's the next loop. All right, so now I've got a whole bunch of crystal flash I can work with. And so I'll typically get 2 uses out of this little bunch, so I'll stick the other side of it down. And I want the crystal flash to basically go underneath, so I'll kind of blend it in. And then, let's see, I'm going to put that crystal flash a little bit further back. There we go. All right, and you end up with this nice bunch of tail material with the marabou on top and the crystal flash on the bottom. And then I usually either make it the length of the hook or maybe 1.5 times the length. And it's just kind of a feel thing. All right, so you're going to tie that down on the very back end of the hook. It'll try and move around on you. You just got to kind of wrestle with it. Cut off your excess. Like I said, your bead's going to move around a little bit. All right, now it's time for the body material. And we are basically, we're first going to put on a body hackle. And so since this is a size 10 hook, I'm going to want to get something that's closer to the top rather than back here. This is the big stuff. And again, I can't stress this enough. If you buy just a bag of loose hackle, a lot of times it is not the right size for these smaller hooks. So I'm going to pull something out of here. Let's see. Yeah, those are still just a little too thick for my liking. Maybe over here is something good. There we go. That's good enough. All right. So here is basically the hackle feather I chose. It's still a little large for my size when it ends up being wrapped around here, but it's good enough. And then you get into the age-old. A chicken neck has the feathers that are on the outside side of the feather and then the underside of the feather. This woolly bugger, I do not really fish it dry, so I would not put the underside of the hackle toward the front of the fly. Instead, we would make it the outer part of the feather is going to be towards the front. And that tends to make a nymph or a thing like a woolly bugger look a little bit more realistic as it goes through the water. All right, you want to strip this long stuff off so you've got something to tie. And then you're going to put this one on first. Right there. And you're just going to get it ready. Now we take our chenille body material. This happens to be sparkle chenille, so it's got a metallic look to it. And you just want to tie a little piece of this on. And now that you've got these two tied on, you're done with the back of the fly. So you might as well get all the way up to the front. In fact, sometimes I even set my bobbin down over here to get it out of the way. All right, we're gonna wind the chenille first. as our body material. So basically I make one run from the back to the front is all I really need. And I stop with I leave a little tiny bit of room up there because the hackle's gonna come up and need to be tied off also. So I'm gonna leave a little bit of room between the chenille and the red bead, and I'm gonna tie it off. Just like 3 times is probably good enough. Cut your excess. Now it's time to wind the body hackle. So you take your hackle pliers. I prefer ones with kind of a rubber rather than all metal ones, but that's just me. I think they grip a little bit better. And now you're just gonna wind this hackle in a circle till it gets to the front. And once you're up at the front, oh, I hate it when it does that. When it gets to the front, then you're gonna wanna tie off that little tiny piece of hackle. Okay. And now before I do the finishing tool, which is this guy right here, before I do the finishing tool, I always like to pull back everything and see if I can just kind of make a little bug head or whatever I need to make there, just to give it a little extra strength. And now I use the whip finishing tool to basically, this is the way I was taught, you grab onto the thread with the first hook, put the second hook on there, rotate your bobbin so that you run the thread through that third channel, and you take the whole thing and put that final channel up on the fly, and you spin around a couple times and then pull on the bobbin and it'll pull that off, and there's a nice little knot. And I only do 2, so there's my first one. And there's my second one. And now I got these wonderful knots. So the final thing to do, I can go ahead and clip this off. The final thing to do would be to get some head cement, and it has this really cool applicator tip that basically gets a little drip of glue, and you put it right there where you tied that off. And what that serves to do is act as it keeps your knots from unrolling, and then your whole fly falls apart. And it also tends to glue this red bead in place so that it doesn't move around. Not that I care, it's not really going anywhere. And the final thing I would do before I put it in my fly box, I would sharpen this very nicely with a little mini whetstone that I have. And then we would fish it the way we talked about in the first video, and there's your black woolly bugger with red bead head and furnace body hackle. And I think now that I have all the camera set up and the lighting and everything, I mean, today's not great because I got a ton of sunlight pouring in here, but the bottom line is I have everything set up. I think I'll go ahead and tie the other colors, the olive, the brown, and the purple. Oh, couple more tips. Make some of these without a bead head at all. And that just means you don't put the bead on, you move everything a little bit forward, and then you still have a little tiny thread head up here. And that's because some grizzled old salts out on the web swear up and down that there are going to be days where for some reason this bead spooks them. I don't know if it flashes at them. Of course, if the bead head's going to flash them, wouldn't the crystal flash do it too? I don't know. They just say to do that, to have some without beads. The other thing to do, experiment with different bead colors. There's gold, silver, tungsten, brass, red like we got here, and I'm sure there's all kinds of other colors too. But that right there is a fly that I have caught 4-pound rainbow trout, 5-pound German brown, bass, 3 to 4 pound smallmouth bass, and then everything smaller. And it ends up being just a perfect4 hook for what I'm going after. Plus it's just fun to tie. All right, enjoy. All right, this is the 4-pound rainbow trout that we caught in 4th of July Lake. That's a lake near Ritzville, Washington, and it is only open from Black Friday to March 30th. And that was caught with a black woolly bugger. And then this is the infamous German brown, about a 5-pound German brown that we caught out of Lake Wenatchee. And you can see the black woolly bugger sitting in my mouth because the leader broke when I was getting this fish out of the water. So yeah, successful fly.